The day Earth's sleeping warriors awoke, the galaxy trembled. It began with a flash in the sky over New York City, a Vulcan warship tearing through Earth's atmosphere. Within minutes, similar reports flooded in from London, Beijing, Moscow, and every major city across the globe. The alien invasion force, led by the ruthless Commander Hydrus, had launched their surprise attack. Brian Grant was mowing his lawn when the first plasma blast vaporized his neighbor's house. The former Special Forces operative's muscle memory kicked in instantly. He dove for cover, his heart pounding as he assessed the situation. Overhead, sleek alien craft rained destruction on his quiet suburban street. Screams and explosions filled the air as panicked civilians fled their homes. Without hesitation, Brian sprinted to his garage. He ripped open a hidden compartment, revealing a cache of weapons he'd hoped never to use again. As he strapped on body armor and checked his rifle, Brian's phone buzzed. The alert made his blood run cold. Protocol Sleeping Warrior activated. All former military personnel report for immediate reactivation. Brian emerged from his garage to find chaos. Alien ground troops were already advancing down the street, their energy weapons cutting down fleeing humans. He spotted a group of terrified neighbors huddled behind an overturned car. In that moment, Brian's training took over. He rallied the civilians, organizing them into an impromptu resistance cell. As Brian led his makeshift squad through alien-controlled streets, he encountered other sleeping warriors, veterans and reservists answering the call to arms. They fought their way to the nearest military base, where the true scope of the invasion became clear. Earth wasn't alone in this fight. The Vulcans were waging a campaign of conquest across multiple star systems. Inside the base, frantic officers briefed the reactivated personnel. Humanity's unexpected resistance had caught the Vulcans off guard. For years, Earth had been secretly developing advanced weapons and spacecraft based on recovered alien technology, preparing for this very day. Now those preparations would be put to the ultimate test. Brian found himself assigned to lead an elite squad of fellow sleeping warriors on a high-stakes mission. Their objective: infiltrate a Vulcan command ship and gather critical intelligence. As they geared up with prototype plasma rifles and nanofiber combat suits, reports streamed in from human colonies and outposts throughout the galaxy. The Vulcan attack was system-wide. Standing before his team, Brian felt the weight of not just Earth, but all of humanity's future resting on their shoulders. He looked into the determined eyes of his fellow warriors, men and women who had thought their fighting days were behind them. Now, they stood as the last line of defense against an alien force bent on galactic domination. As they boarded the stealth dropship that would insert them behind enemy lines, Brian realized a profound truth. The sleeping warriors of Earth weren't just defending their home planet. They were the guardians of humanity's place among the stars, and the Vulcans were about to learn just how fiercely they would fight for it. The stealth dropship's engines hummed softly as it glided through the chaos of Earth's upper atmosphere. Brian gripped the handrail, his eyes fixed on the tactical display. The Vulcan fleet loomed above, a constellation of deadly warships raining destruction on his homeworld. Suddenly, the display erupted with new data points. Hundreds of seemingly defunct satellites blazed to life, revealing themselves as camouflaged weapon platforms. Earth's hidden defense grid had awakened. "Holy shit," whispered Corporal Rodriguez, her eyes wide. "Command's been holding out on us." Brian allowed himself a grim smile. "Looks like we've got a few tricks up our sleeve after all." The orbital platforms opened fire, lancing beams of energy slicing through Vulcan shields. Alien ships reeled under the unexpected assault, their formation fracturing. "That's our cue," Brian announced. "Shadow Whisper, you're clear for approach." The prototype shuttle detached from the dropship, its stealth systems engaged. Brian felt a momentary vertigo as artificial gravity fluctuated. Then they were moving, threading through the debris-filled space towards the massive Vulcan command ship. Inside the shuttle, Brian briefed his team one final time. "Remember, we're after two objectives: data extraction and sabotage. Major Johnson, you'll lead Alpha Team to disable their propulsion. Beta Team, you're with me. We're hitting the central data core." The shuttle's pilot, a young lieutenant named Chen, called out, 30 seconds to contact. Mimetic systems are holding steady. Brian took a deep breath, centering himself. Lock and load, people. We're about to crash this party. Shadow Whisper nestled against the Vulcan ship's hull, magnetic clamps engaging silently. Brian's team moved swiftly, cutting through the alien metal with plasma torches. They slipped inside, the shuttle detaching to maintain its cover nearby. The interior of the Vulcan vessel was a maze of twisting corridors, bathed in an eerie purple light. Strange organic shapes merged with angular metal, creating an unsettling hybrid of technology and biology. Stay sharp, Brian murmured. Johnson, take your team and head aft. We'll rendezvous at the extraction point in 2 hours. The major nodded, leading her squad down a branching passage. Brian motioned his team forward, consulting the holomap projected from his wrist computer. They encountered their first obstacle within minutes, a security checkpoint manned by hulking Vulcan guards. Brian signaled a halt, assessing the situation. He caught the eye of Sergeant Wei, their tech specialist, and nodded towards a nearby access panel. Wei understood immediately, fingers flying over his datapad. The checkpoint's force fields flickered and died. Before the guards could react, Brian's team was on them. Stun batons crackled with energy as they engaged in silent, brutal close-quarters combat. In seconds, it was over. Nice work, Brian said, dragging an unconscious Vulcan into a storage alcove. Wei, see what you can pull from their systems. Everyone else, watch our 6. They pressed deeper into the ship, disabling security measures and evading patrols. Brian's mind raced, processing the alien environment. The Vulcan ship felt almost alive with surfaces that pulsed and shifted subtly. Finally, they reached the central data core, a massive chamber filled with crystalline structures that glowed with stored information. Wei immediately set to work, interfacing their quantum drives with the alien technology. Sir, Wei called out, his voice tight, you need to see this. Brian joined him, studying the holographic display. His blood ran cold as he absorbed the implications of what he was seeing. They're not just invading, they're harvesting us. The data painted a grim picture. Earth wasn't simply a conquest, it was a cure. Human DNA held the key to saving the Vulcan race from a plague that threatened their entire species. Before Brian could fully process this revelation, his calm crackled to life. Johnson's voice came through, tense and breathless. Bravo team, be advised. We've completed our objective, but we've taken heavy casualties. Half my squad is down. We're cut off from the primary exfil route. Brian's mind raced, weighing options. Copy that, Alpha. Fall back to secondary extraction point. We'll rendezvous there. He turned to his team. Change of plans. Wei, initiate data upload to Earth Command. Encrypt and compress everything we've found. The rest of you, we're going hunting. They moved out, leaving Wei to complete the transmission. Brian led them deeper into the Vulcan ship towards the command deck. If they couldn't make it out with the data, they'd take the next best thing, a high-ranking Vulcan officer who could provide critical intelligence. As they advanced, the ship's internal defenses came alive. Force fields sprang up, sealing off corridors. A sickly green gas began to seep from hidden vents. Masks on, Brian ordered, pulling his rebreather into place. They pushed forward, engaging in firefights with Vulcan security forces at every turn. The alien weaponry scorched the walls around them, filling the air with an acrid, burning smell. Brian's team fought with the desperate efficiency of those with nothing left to lose. They cleared room after room, steadily approaching the command deck. But time was running out. Earth's orbital defenses were faltering under the Vulcan counterattack, and their window for extraction was rapidly closing. As they neared their target, Brian received another transmission, this time from Earth Command. The data they'd sent was already yielding results. Human forces were launching precision strikes against Vulcan supply lines and command nodes, buying precious time for the planet's defenders. With restored dedication, Brian led his team in a final push. They breached the command deck in a hail of plasma fire and stun grenades. In the chaos, Brian spotted their prize, a Vulcan officer with elaborate insignia, barking orders from a central platform. There, Brian shouted to take him alive. They surged forward, weathering the last desperate counterattack from the Vulcan crew. Brian's stun baton connected with the officer's midsection, dropping him to the deck. As his team secured their prisoner, Brian allowed himself a moment of grim satisfaction. But their victory was short-lived. Alarms blared throughout the ship, and the deck shuddered beneath their feet. They were out of time. "Move," Brian ordered, hefting the unconscious Vulcan over his shoulder. Back to the extraction point, double time. They ran through the twisting corridors, the ship seeming to constrict around them. Behind them, they could hear the thunderous footsteps of Vulcan reinforcements closing in. Ahead lay uncertainty, and their only chance of survival. As they neared the rendezvous point, Brian's comm crackled once more. It was Chen piloting the Shadow Whisper. "Sir, the Vulcan fleet is regrouping. Earth's defenses are on the verge of collapse. We need to go now, or we won't make it out at all." Brian gritted his teeth, pushing his team to their limits. They rounded a final corner to find Johnson and her surviving squad members engaged in a fierce firefight. Beyond them, through a breach in the hull, Brian could see the sleek form of their shuttle waiting. "Covering fire," he roared, and his team unleashed a barrage of plasma bolts down the corridor. "Johnson, go. We're right behind you." As Johnson's team scrambled aboard the shuttle, Brian took one last look at the alien ship that had nearly become their tomb. Then he was moving, propelling himself and their Vulcan prisoner through the vacuum of space and into the Shadow Whisper's open hatch. "We're clear," Brian shouted as the hatch sealed behind him. "Get us out of here, Chen." The shuttle's engines flared to life, rocketing them away from the Vulcan command ship. As they climbed towards the safety of Earth's atmosphere, Brian allowed himself a moment to breathe. They had accomplished their mission, but at a terrible cost, and the battle for Earth was just getting started. Through the shuttle's view screen, he watched as human and Vulcan ships clashed in the darkness of space. Somewhere down there, in the cities and towns of his embattled homeworld, other sleeping warriors were fighting their own desperate battles. Brian tightened his grip on his weapon, knowing that the true test still lay ahead. Ahead, the Shadow Whisper streaked through the chaos of orbital combat, dodging debris and weapons fire as it descended towards Earth. Brian's mind raced, processing the implications of their mission and the intelligence they'd gathered. As they entered the atmosphere, Chen's voice crackled over the comms. "Incoming transmission from Earth Command, Priority Alpha." Brian nodded, accepting the call. General Hawthorne's weathered face appeared on the interface, his expression grim but determined. "Captain, your team's data transmission has yielded critical results. Our analysts have identified a vulnerability in the Vulcan shield systems. We're recalibrating our weapons now, but we need you back on the ground ASAP for debriefing and reassignment." "Copy that, General," Brian replied. "We're en route to—" An explosion rocked the shuttle, cutting off Brian's words. Alarms blared as Chen fought to maintain control. "Multiple bogies on our 6, Chen shouted. "Vulcan interceptors. They must have tracked us from the command ship." Brian gripped his harness, mind already formulating a plan. "Evasive maneuvers, Lieutenant. Johnson, get on those rear turrets. Everyone else, strap in tight. This is going to get rough." The Shadow Whisper dove and weaved through the stratosphere, its stealth system straining against the Vulcan pursuit. Johnson's precise fire kept the interceptors at bay, but it was clear they couldn't outrun them forever. "Sir," Chen called out, "I can get us to the Shanghai reactivation facility. It's the closest friendly base with adequate defenses." Brian nodded grimly. "Do it." The next few minutes were a blur of high-G maneuvers and narrow misses. As they approached the sprawling complex of the Shanghai facility, Brian saw the flash of surface-to-air missiles launching to intercept their pursuers. The Vulcan ships peeled off, unable to penetrate the base's formidable defenses. They landed hard on the facility's main pad, the Shadow Whisper's engines sputtering and smoking from the strain. As the hatch opened, Brian saw a team of technicians and medical personnel rushing towards them. "Get the wounded to medbay," he ordered, helping Corporal Rodriguez limp down the ramp. Wei, make sure all our data is transferred to the base's secure servers. The rest of you, report for debrief in 20 minutes. As his team dispersed, Brian found himself face-to-face with Colonel Yuki Tanaka, the base commander. Her expression was a mix of relief and urgency. "Captain, we've been monitoring your approach. Walk with me, we have much to discuss." They strode through the bustling corridors of the facility, passing squads of newly awakened sleeping warriors, being equipped and briefed for combat. "Your team's intel has been a game changer," Tanaka explained. "We're already seeing results. Our orbital platforms are inflicting serious damage on the Vulcan fleet, but we need to press our advantage before they can adapt." They entered a high-security briefing room where a holographic display showed the ongoing battle for Earth. Brian's eyes widened as he saw the extent of the conflict. Major cities around the globe were lit up with firefights, while in orbit, human ships clashed with Vulcan vessels in a deadly dance. "We're dispatching your team to assist in a critical operation," Tanaka continued. "You'll be inserted into the Vulcan command ship again, this time with a larger force. Your objective is to capture High Commander Zarek, the mastermind behind this invasion." Brian's mind raced, considering the implications. "With all due respect, Colonel, my team just barely made it out of there alive. How are we supposed to—" The door hissed open, interrupting him. A tall, slender figure entered, flanked by armed guards. Brian's hand instinctively went to his sidearm before he realized the newcomer wasn't human. "Captain Brian," Tanaka said, "meet Lyra. She's a Vulcan scientist and our newest ally." Lyra stepped forward, her alien features set in a determined expression. "I am part of a resistance movement within Vulcan society," she explained, her voice carrying an otherworldly timbre. "We oppose this invasion and wish to see peace between our peoples. I can help you infiltrate the command ship and locate Zarek?" Brian studied the Vulcan, his training warring with the potential advantage her aid could provide. "How can we trust you?" Lyra met his gaze steadily. "Because the alternative is the destruction of both our species. This war serves only the interests of a misguided few. I can prove my loyalty by guiding you through the ship's defenses." Before Brian could respond, alarms blared throughout the facility. Colonel Tanaka rushed to a nearby console, her fingers flying over the controls. "Multiple breaches reported in Sectors 3 and 7, she announced. "Vulcan strike teams have penetrated our outer defenses." Brian's combat instincts kicked in. "Colonel, my team can help repel the attack. We need to secure this facility before we can launch any further operations." Tanaka nodded sharply. "Agreed. Take Lyra with you. If she's genuine, her knowledge of Vulcan tactics could be invaluable." Brian keyed his comm, alerting his team. "Gear up and meet me at Junction B4. We've got hostiles in the base." As they moved out, Brian glanced at Lyra. "Stay close and follow my lead, and remember, one wrong move." The Vulcan scientist nodded solemnly. "I understand, Captain. My life is in your hands, as the fate of both our worlds may soon be." They raced through the corridors, the sounds of battle growing louder. As they rounded a corner, they came face to face with a squad of Vulcan soldiers. Time seemed to slow as both sides raised their weapons. Brian's mind flashed to the data they'd recovered, the sacrifices made to get this far. He knew that the next few moments could decide not just the fate of this base, but potentially the entire course of the war. With Earth's forces finally on the offensive and a potential ally at his side, he felt the weight of humanity's future bearing down on him. Taking a deep breath, Brian raised his plasma rifle and prepared to engage the enemy. The next chapter of the battle for Earth was about to unfold, and he was determined to see it through to the end. Bitter end. The Shadow Whisper shuddered as it entered Earth's atmosphere, plasma flaring around its hull. Brian gripped his harness, eyes fixed on the interface. As they descended through the cloud cover, his breath caught in his throat. Earth had transformed. Massive energy shields shimmered over major cities, their iridescent domes stretching skyward. In the distance, hidden missile silos burst open from seemingly innocuous hillsides. The orbital defense platforms above reconfigured before their eyes, linking together in a complex defensive grid. "My God," Chen whispered from the pilot's seat. What did we miss while we were up there? Before Brian could respond, a priority transmission crackled through the comms. Shadow Whisper, this is Earth Command. You are to divert immediately to Cheyenne Mountain. Land at coordinates being transmitted now. Brian exchanged glances with his team. Copy that command. Diverting now. As Chen adjusted their course, Brian studied the rapidly changing landscape below. Combat mechs patrolled city perimeters, their massive forms dwarfing the surrounding buildings. Convoys of vehicles filled with energy weapons snaked along highways. It was as if the entire planet had become a fortress overnight. The Shadow Whisper touched down on a concealed landing pad nestled in the Rocky Mountains. As the hatch opened, Brian was greeted by a contingent of heavily armed soldiers in unfamiliar power armor. Captain Brian, a gruff voice called out. A tall, silver-haired man in a general's uniform approached. I'm General Marcus Steele. Welcome to Operation Sleeping Giant. Brian saluted crisply. Sir, we have High Commander Zarak in custody, along with the data we retrieved from the Vulcan command ship. Steele nodded, his eyes gleaming. Excellent work, Captain. Follow me. We have much to discuss and little time to waste. They descended into the mountain via a high-speed elevator. Brian's team, still carrying their unconscious Vulcan prisoner, marveled at the vast underground complex revealed as the doors slid open. This facility has been here for decades, Steele explained as they walked. Built to house and develop technology reverse-engineered from crashed alien ships. Now it's the nerve center of Earth's defense. They entered a bustling command center filled with holographic displays and frantic activity. Steele led them to a secure interrogation room where Zarak was strapped to a chair, now conscious and glowering. Let's see what our esteemed guest can tell us about Vulcan battle tactics, Steele said, his voice cold. As the interrogation began, Brian's attention was drawn to a nearby laboratory. Through the transparent walls, he saw a familiar figure, Lyra, the Vulcan scientist who had aided their escape. She was working alongside human researchers, her slender fingers dancing over holographic interfaces. Sensing his gaze, Lyra looked up and nodded in acknowledgement. Brian felt a mix of emotions, gratitude for her help, lingering suspicion, and a grudging respect for her dedication to stopping this war. Hours passed in a blur of debriefings, tactical meetings, and equipment upgrades. Brian's team was outfitted with new power armor suits, their capabilities far beyond anything they had used before. As they familiarized themselves with the new tech, alarms blared throughout the facility. Unidentified ships approaching Earth orbit, a voice announced over the intercom. All personnel to battle stations. Brian and his team raced to the command center. The main view screen showed a cluster of sleek, unfamiliar vessels decelerating as they neared Earth. Vulcan reinforcements? Brian asked, tension coiling in his gut. Steele shook his head, studying the sensor readings. No, these are different. Wait, we're receiving a transmission. The screen flickered, revealing a diverse array of alien faces. A towering reptilian figure stepped forward, its scales shimmering under the ship's lights. People of Earth, the alien's translated voice boomed. I am Zorak of Krell. We represent species long oppressed by the Vulcan Empire. Your resistance has inspired us. We come to offer our aid in your fight for freedom. A ripple of astonishment passed through the command center. Steele's eyes narrowed, considering the implications. This changes everything, he muttered. Over the next few days, Earth's defenses were bolstered by the arrival of their new allies. Brian found himself working closely with Zorak, the Krellian warrior, as they integrated alien technology and tactics into Earth's battle plans. Your people fight with admirable spirit, Zorak rumbled as they studied holographic battle simulations. But the Vulcans outnumber us still. We must strike hard and fast. Brian nodded, pointing to key positions in the Vulcan fleet formation. Hit-and-run attacks here and here, disrupt their communications, sow chaos in their ranks. As the combined Earth and alien resistance forces prepared for the coming battle, Brian was summoned to a high-level briefing. General Steele stood before a group of elite soldiers, human and alien alike. You've been chosen for a critical mission, Steele announced. Captain Brian will lead this strike team to infiltrate and sabotage key Vulcan command ships. Your success could turn the tide of this war. Brian surveyed his new team. Familiar human faces mixed with alien forms he was still learning to recognize. The diversity of their group was staggering, each member bringing unique skills and physiologies to the table. As they began their intensive training regimen, reports came in of the Vulcan Armada entering the solar system. Earth launched its first wave of attacks. Stealth ships piloted by reactivated sleeping warriors struck at Vulcan supply lines, while the orbital defense grid unleashed a barrage of energy weapons never before seen in combat. The night before their mission, Brian stood on an observation deck, watching the distant flashes of battle in Earth orbit. Zorak joined him, the Krellian's massive form casting a shadow in the dim light. "Are you prepared for tomorrow, human?" Zorak asked, his multifaceted eyes reflecting the starlight. Brian checked his power armor one last time, feeling the hum of its advanced systems. "As ready as we'll ever be, this is our best shot at turning the tide." Zorak placed a clawed hand on Brian's shoulder. "Then let us bring the fight to the Vulcans, for Earth, for Krell, and for all those who yearn to be free." As they boarded their stealth insertion craft, Brian felt the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. The fate of not just Earth, but countless alien worlds hinged on their success. He looked at his diverse team, humans and aliens united in common cause, and knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. The ship's engines flared to life, carrying them towards the heart of the Vulcan fleet. As they accelerated, Brian's mind raced with the complexities of their mission. The advanced cloaking technology hummed around them, their only shield against the vast array of Vulcan sensors and weaponry. "Approaching target," the pilot announced, her voice tight with concentration. "Prepare for insertion." Insertion. Brian took a deep breath, steeling himself for what was to come. "Remember, we're ghosts, silent and invisible until we strike." The craft shuddered as it penetrated the Vulcan ship's shields, its advanced cloaking technology rendering it undetectable. With practiced precision, the team disembarked, their power armor allowing them to move with surprising agility despite the bulky appearance. As they made their way through the labyrinthine corridors of the Vulcan command ship, Brian's comm crackled to life. General Steele's voice came through, tense and urgent. "Captain, situation's changed. Earth's under heavy assault. Our new defenses are holding for now, but the Vulcans are throwing everything they've got at us. We've detected something big on that ship, possibly a bioweapon. Finding and neutralizing it is now your top priority." Brian's expression resolute. "Understood, sir. We're on it." He quickly briefed his team on the new objective. As they discussed their approach, a shadow detached itself from a nearby alcove. Brian's weapons snapped up, only to find himself face-to-face with a Vulcan in security armor. "Wait," the Vulcan said, hands raised. "I am Krovak. I wish to help." Brian's finger tightened on the trigger. "Why should we trust you?" "Because I've seen the truth of this war," Krovak replied, his voice low and urgent. "The suffering it's caused, not just to your people, but to countless others. This bioweapon, it's an abomination. I can help you find it and destroy it." After a tense moment, Brian nodded. "All right, but one wrong move." Krovak led them through the ship, avoiding patrols and security checkpoints with insider knowledge. As they moved, Brian's thoughts turned to Earth. Through the ship's viewport, he caught glimpses of the battle raging around his home planet. Energy shields shimmered over major cities, straining under the constant barrage of Vulcan weapons. In orbit, Admiral Hayes's fleet executed a daring maneuver, concentrating fire on a weak point in the Vulcan formation. The gambit paid off, splitting the Armada and disrupting their coordinated assault. On the ground, the sleeping warriors led the defense. In London, Jack Thompson and his team deployed mobile energy barriers, protecting key infrastructure from Vulcan landing parties. The city's skyline was a chaos of energy weapon fire and smoke. Back on the command ship, Brian's team encountered heavy resistance as they neared the bioweapon storage facility. Vulcan guards, their weapons blazing with deadly energy, poured into the corridor. "Cover!" Brian shouted, diving behind a bulkhead. His team reacted instantly, returning fire with their advanced weaponry. The battle was fierce in close quarters. Two of Brian's team, Chen and Rodriguez, went down under a barrage of Vulcan fire. Their power armor sparked and smoked, internal medical systems working overtime to keep them alive. "We need to push through," Brian called out, lobbing a plasma grenade into the Vulcan ranks. The explosion rocked the corridor, momentarily clearing a path. They fought their way forward, Krovak's knowledge of Vulcan tactics proving invaluable. Finally, they reached the sealed doors of the bioweapon storage. "It's already primed for deployment," Krovak warned as they forced entry. "We don't have much time." Inside, they found a massive device, pulsing with sickly green energy. Holographic displays showed targeting information. Earth was in its crosshairs. "We need to destroy it," Brian said, his mind racing, "but the explosion will take out the entire ship." As they worked to rig the bioweapon for destruction, Brian's comm crackled again. This time, it was Admiral Hayes. "Captain, we've got a new asset in play. The lunar base just revealed some serious firepower. A railgun that's giving the Vulcans hell. We're making progress up here, but we need more time." Brian acknowledged the update, a glimmer of hope rising in his chest. Earth was fighting back with everything it had. With the charges set, the team faced a grim reality. Their escape route was cut off, Vulcan reinforcements closing in from all sides. "There might be a way," Krovak said suddenly. "There's a secret escape pod reserved for high-ranking officers. I can lead you there." Brian hesitated only for a moment before nodding. "Lead the way." They fought through the ship once more, this time racing against both the Vulcan forces and the ticking clock of their own explosive device. The ship shuddered around them as the lunar railgun scored direct hits, adding to the chaos. As they neared the escape pod, Brian's comm came to life one last time. General Steele's voice was grim. "Captain, we've detected the bioweapon powering up. We're activating Project Omega. You need to destroy that weapon now, whatever the cost." Brian's blood ran cold. Project Omega, the last resort. Whatever it was, he knew it meant Earth was facing its darkest hour. They reached the escape pod, a sleek vessel barely large enough for the team. As Krovak worked to override the launch protocols, Brian made his decision. "Everyone in," he ordered. "I'll set off the charges manually." His team protested, but Brian stood firm. "That's an order. Earth needs you for what's coming next." As the pod doors closed on his team's anguished faces, Brian turned back towards the heart of the ship. He moved with fierce dedication, knowing that his next actions would determine the fate not just of Earth, but of countless worlds oppressed by the Vulcan Empire. Behind him, the escape pod launched, streaking away from the massive command ship. Ahead lay the bioweapon, and a future hanging in the balance. Brian's hand hovered over the detonator, his eyes fixed on the viewport showing Earth, battered but still fighting. He took a deep breath, thought of home, and pressed the button. The explosion rocked the command ship, a chain reaction tearing through its vital systems. As alarms blared and the ship began to break apart, Brian allowed himself a small smile. The bioweapon was destroyed, and Earth had a fighting chance. In the vacuum of space, the Vulcan command ship erupted in a massive fireball, visible from the surface of Earth. The battle was not nearly finished, but a critical blow had been struck. As the shockwave dissipated, revealing the planet still standing defiantly, the next phase of the war for Earth and the galaxy was about to begin. The explosion rocked the Vulcan command ship, sending shockwaves through its vast structure. Brian steadied himself against a bulkhead as alarms blared and emergency lights flashed. He allowed himself a brief moment of satisfaction. The bioweapon was destroyed, and Earth had been spared its devastation. But there was no time for celebration. Brian sprinted through the disintegrating corridors, his power armor's enhanced speed pushing him to his limits. He had to reach the escape pod before the ship tore itself apart. As he rounded a corner, he nearly collided with his team and Krovak. Their faces showed a mix of relief and willpower. "Captain," Chen called out, "we couldn't leave you behind." Brian nodded, grateful for their loyalty. "Let's move. This whole ship's about to become a fireball." They raced towards the secret escape pod, Krovac leading the way through the labyrinthine passageways. The ship shuddered around them, debris raining from the ceiling as its structural integrity failed. Suddenly, a plasma bolt sizzled past Brian's head. He spun, raising his weapon, to see a squad of Vulcan security forces bearing down on them. At their head stood a tall, imposing figure, Sub-Commander Vexillor, his reputation for ruthlessness evident in his cold, calculating eyes. "Take cover!" Brian shouted, diving behind a fallen support beam. His team reacted instantly, spreading out and returning fire. The narrow corridor became a kill zone, energy weapons scorching the walls and filling the air with ozone. Brian's team fought with desperate intensity, knowing their survival hung by a thread. Rodriguez went down, a Vulcan blast penetrating his armor's weakened shields. Chen dragged him to safety, administering emergency medical treatment even as she continued to fire her weapon one-handed. Krovac proved his worth, using his intimate knowledge of Vulcan tactics to outmaneuver Vexillor's forces. He called out vulnerabilities in their formation, allowing Brian's team to exploit them with deadly precision. But Vexillor was relentless. His elite guards pushed forward, their superior numbers slowly overwhelming the human-alien alliance. Brian realized with growing dread that they might not all make it out alive. As if reading his thoughts, Krovac spoke up. "There's a bulkhead control panel just ahead. If I can reach it, I can seal off this section. It will buy you the time you need to reach the escape pod." Brian's eyes widened as he understood the Vulcan's implication. "Krovac, no, there has to be another way." The alien warrior shook his head, a grim smile on his face. "It has been an honor to fight alongside you humans. Now go, save your world." Before Brian could protest further, Krovac launched himself towards the control panel. Vulcan weapons fire concentrated on him, but he moved with preternatural speed and agility. His fingers flew over the panel, and with a resounding clang, the bulkhead slammed shut. The last thing Brian saw was Krovac turning to face the oncoming Vulcan forces, weapon raised defiantly. "Let's go," Brian said, his voice thick with emotion. "We can't let his sacrifice be in vain." They sprinted the final distance to the escape pod, a sleek vessel barely large enough for the team. As they piled in, Brian's comm crackled to life. General Steele's voice came through, tense but controlled. "Captain, the situation has changed. Project Omega is fully operational. We're hitting the Vulcans with everything we've got." As if to punctuate the general's words, the ship rocked violently. Through the escape pod's viewport, Brian saw massive energy beams lancing out from the direction of Earth's moon, cutting through Vulcan ships with terrifying efficiency. "Launching now, sir," Brian reported as he initiated the pod's launch sequence. "We've destroyed the bioweapon, but the Vulcans still have a significant force. We gathered critical intel that could turn the tide." "Understood, Captain. Get that information to us ASAP. Earth's fate may depend on it." The escape pod blasted free of the disintegrating Vulcan command ship, streaking towards the blue-green orb of Earth. As they hurtled through space, Brian and his team watched in awe as the battle unfolded around them. Earth's space fleet, bolstered by allied alien ships, surged forward in a coordinated assault. The newly revealed lunar cannons continued their devastating barrage, creating gaps in the Vulcan formation that human and allied ships exploited with ruthless efficiency. On the planet's surface, the ground battle raged with renewed intensity. Brian's tactical display showed Vulcan landing parties being systematically cut off and neutralized. In Beijing, a massive firefight erupted as Colonel Li Wei led a combined force against a Vulcan stronghold. The experimental-powered armor suits worn by Earth's forces gave them a crucial edge, allowing them to go toe-to-toe with the technologically superior Vulcans. As their pod entered Earth's atmosphere, Brian received another transmission. This time, it was Admiral Hayes, her voice filled with cautious optimism. Captain, we've got a new ace up our sleeve. Project Phoenix is operational, a fleet of advanced warships we've been building in secret. They're launching now from underwater bases. Brian watched in amazement as sleek, deadly vessels rose from the oceans, their hulls glistening with technology that seamlessly blended human ingenuity with reverse-engineered alien advancements. These ships immediately joined the fray, their weapons tearing through Vulcan defenses with ease. The tide of battle shifted dramatically. Vulcan ships, caught between multiple vectors of attack, began to falter. Reports flooded in from around the globe of enemy forces retreating or surrendering en masse. But victory remained elusive. As Brian's team prepared for a rough landing, they intercepted Vulcan communications indicating a desperate, last-ditch strategy. The remaining Vulcan ships were converging on Earth, preparing for an all-out suicidal assault. "We need to get this intel to command immediately," Brian told his team as their pod streaked towards the ground. "The information we gathered on that ship could be the key to repelling this final attack." They braced for impact as the pod hit Earth's surface with a bone-jarring thud. Stumbling out onto scorched Earth, they found themselves in the middle of a war-torn landscape. In the distance, the smoldering ruins of a city stood as a stark reminder of the cost of this conflict. A military transport was already waiting for them, its engines roaring with urgency. As they boarded, Brian's mind raced with the implications of the intelligence they carried. He knew that somewhere out there, the sleeping warriors of Earth were preparing for what could be their final battle. The transport took off, racing towards General Steele's command center. Brian looked out the window at the ravaged planet below, knowing that the next few hours would determine the fate of not just Earth, but countless worlds oppressed by the Vulcan Empire. As they approached the command center, long-range sensors blared a warning. A second wave of the Vulcan Armada, even larger than the first, had been detected at the edge of the solar system. This massive reinforcement force was rapidly approaching, threatening to overwhelm Earth's already strained defenses. Brian clenched his fist, the weight of the coming battle settling on his shoulders. The information they carried was now more critical than ever. As the transport descended towards the command center, he steeled himself for the challenges ahead. The war for Earth and the galaxy was about to enter its most crucial phase. The transport touched down with a jolt, its landing struts absorbing the impact on the cracked tarmac of the command center's runway. Brian and his team wasted no time, sprinting towards the fortified bunker entrance as soon as the ramp lowered. Above them, the sky flickered with distant explosions and streaking energy weapons, a constant reminder of the battle raging in orbit. General Steele met them at the entrance, his face a mask of fierce dedication. "Captain, we don't have much time. What did you find?" Brian quickly outlined the intelligence they'd gathered on the Vulcan command ship. As he spoke, holographic displays sprang to life around them, showing the approaching Vulcan Armada in real time. "Their fleet relies on a centralized command structure," Brian explained, pointing to key vessels within the enemy formation. "Take out these ships, and we could throw their entire assault into chaos." Steele's eyes narrowed as he processed the information. "This could be the break we've been waiting for. Follow me." They hurried through the bustling command center, passing rows of analysts and technicians working feverishly at their stations. Steele led them to a secure briefing room where several high-ranking officers were already gathered. "Ladies and gentlemen," Steele announced, "we have a new strategy." As the general outlined the plan, Brian watched the faces around the room. He saw hope flickering in their eyes for the first time since the invasion began. "We'll deploy our stealth fighters," Steele continued. "The phase shift technology should allow them to penetrate the Vulcan shields and take out those command ships." Admiral Hayes, joining via holographic projection, nodded in agreement. "I'll coordinate a simultaneous assault with the Project Phoenix fleet. We'll use them as a diversion while positioning our orbital platforms to disrupt Vulcan communications." Suddenly, the room shook as a distant explosion rocked the compound. Dust fell from the ceiling and warning klaxons began to blare. "Vulcan ground forces are pushing towards the command center," an aide reported urgently. Steele's expression hardened. It's time to reveal our hidden ace. Activate the war machines. Brian felt a thrill of anticipation. He'd heard whispers about these secret weapons, but never imagined he'd see them in action. Outside, the earth trembled. Massive hangar doors disguised as innocent hillsides began to slide open. From within emerged colossal mechs, each standing over 100 feet tall. Their armor gleamed with an otherworldly sheen, a fusion of human engineering and reverse-engineered alien technology. The war machines strode into battle, their footsteps shaking the ground. Energy weapons mounted on their arms lashed out, vaporizing Vulcan tanks and dropships with terrifying efficiency. Brian watched in awe as the mechs, piloted by teams of veteran sleeping warriors, turned the tide of the ground battle in a matter of minutes. In orbit, the space battle intensified. Admiral Hayes' voice crackled over the command center's speakers. Stealth Squadron is away. Colonel Johnson is leading the assault on the Vulcan command ships. Brian's heart raced as he imagined Sarah and her pilots weaving through the chaos of combat, their experimental fighters briefly phasing through Vulcan energy shields to deliver precision strikes. The holographic display updated in real time, showing Vulcan formations breaking apart as their command ships were systematically destroyed. Earth's forces pressed their advantage, pushing back against the invaders with renewed vigor. But victory remained elusive. A new alert blared through the command center, causing all heads to turn towards the main screen. Second wave detected, an analyst called out, her voice tight with tension. Massive Vulcan reinforcements approaching from the edge of the solar system. General Steele's face set in grim lines. He turned to Brian, his eyes blazing with purpose. Captain, it's time for our final play. We're activating the Solaris cannon. Brian's eyes widened. He'd heard rumors of a superweapon hidden on the far side of the moon, but never imagined it could be real. Steele continued. The cannon requires time to charge. We need a team to defend it while it powers up. He fixed Brian with a steady gaze. Are you up for one more mission, Captain? Without hesitation, Brian nodded. Assemble a team of our best. We'll hold that cannon if it's the last thing we do. Minutes later, Brian found himself aboard a high-speed transport racing towards the moon. His team, a mix of elite sleeping warriors and alien allies, checked their gear in tense silence. Through the viewports, Brian watched Earth grow smaller, its surface scarred by battle but still defiantly standing against the Vulcan onslaught. As they approached the lunar surface, Brian saw the massive form of the Solaris cannon emerging from its hidden bunker. Energy crackled along its length, drawing power from a network of fusion reactors spread across the moon's surface. But they weren't alone. Vulcan dropships were already descending, their troops determined to destroy the superweapon before it could fire. Brian turned to his team, their faces set with willpower. You all know what's at stake. We hold this line, whatever it takes. They nodded, readying their weapons as the transport touched down on the lunar surface. As they rushed out to set up a defensive perimeter, Brian caught sight of Earth hanging in the black sky above them. Everything they'd fought for, everything they loved, depended on what happened here in the next few hours. The first wave of Vulcan attackers crested the lunar hills, their energy weapons cutting through the vacuum. Brian and his team returned fire, their specially designed weapons leaving trails of superheated plasma in the airless environment. As the battle for the Solaris cannon began in earnest, Brian knew that similar scenes were unfolding across Earth and in the space around it. The sleeping warriors of humanity, along with their alien allies, were fighting with everything they had. The fate of Earth, and indeed the entire galaxy, hung in the balance. As Brian ducked behind a lunar boulder, narrowly avoiding a Vulcan energy blast, he knew that the next few hours would determine whether humanity would fall or rise triumphant against the Vulcan Empire. As Brian ducked behind a lunar boulder, narrowly avoiding a Vulcan energy blast, he knew that the next few hours would determine whether humanity would fall or rise triumphant against the Vulcan onslaught. The lunar surface erupted in chaos as waves of Vulcan dropships descended, disgorging elite troops and heavy assault vehicles. Brian's team, a mix of human sleeping warriors and alien allies, spread out across the rugged terrain surrounding the Solaris cannon. They used the moon's low gravity to execute daring maneuvers, leaping impossibly high to outflank their enemies. Zorak, take your squad and set up an ambush in that crater, Brian ordered, gesturing to a deep depression 100 meters away. The reptilian warrior nodded, his scaled skin gleaming in the harsh sunlight as he and his team bounded across the lunar landscape. Brian's comm crackled to life. Captain, this is Admiral Hayes. The orbital battle is intensifying. We're focusing our attacks on the weak points you identified in the Vulcan formation. It's working, but they keep pressing forward. Understood, Admiral, Brian replied, his voice tight with tension. We'll hold the line here as long as we can. The Solaris cannon is our best shot at turning this around. As if in response to his words, the massive form of the cannon behind them hummed with increasing power. Energy arced between its components, creating a web of light against the star-filled sky. On Earth, the war raged across multiple fronts. Brian's tactical display showed titanic clashes in major cities as Earth's mech units engaged their Vulcan counterparts. In New York, a human-piloted mech used a skyscraper as cover, emerging to blast a Vulcan machine with a concentrated burst of plasma. The enemy mech stumbled, crashing into the East River in a massive plume of steam. An urgent alert flashed across Brian's HUD. He looked up to see a massive Vulcan dreadnought breaking through the defensive line, its imposing form blotting out the stars as it approached the moon. That ship will tear through our defenses before the cannon is ready, Lieutenant Chen said, her voice tight with worry. Brian's mind raced. Conventional weapons wouldn't stop the dreadnought in time. He made a split-second decision. Chen, Ramirez, you're with me. We're boarding that ship. Using captured Vulcan shuttle pods, Brian's small team rocketed towards the approaching dreadnought. They latched onto its hull, cutting their way inside with plasma torches. The interior was a maze of alien corridors, filled with the acrid smell of ozone and unfamiliar chemicals. As they fought their way towards the bridge, Brian's comm picked up a transmission from Colonel Sarah Johnson. Her voice was strained, punctuated by the sounds of battle. This is Phantom Leader. We've taken out 3 more command ships, but we're taking heavy losses. Request immediate backup. Brian gritted his teeth, knowing there was nothing he could do to help Sarah's squadron. He focused on the task at hand, leading his team through a firefight with Vulcan elite guards outside the bridge. Meanwhile, on the lunar surface, Zorak roared a battle cry as he led a desperate last stand at a crucial choke point. His massive form was a blur of motion, alien muscles rippling as he held back wave after wave of Vulcan troops. For Earth, he bellowed, his voice carrying across the comms to inspire the defenders. Inside the dreadnought, Brian's team breached the bridge in a hail of gunfire. Vulcan officers fell before their onslaught, and within moments, they had control of the ship's systems. Sir, what now? Ramirez asked, his fingers flying over the alien controls. Brian's eyes narrowed as he saw the Solaris cannon nearing full charge on his tactical display. We use this ship as a shield. Position us between the cannon and the incoming Vulcan forces. The massive dreadnought lumbered into position just as General Steele's voice crackled over the comm. All units, brace for impact, firing Solaris cannon in 10 seconds. Brian watched in awe as a blinding beam of energy lanced out from the lunar surface. It struck the dreadnought, using its mass to amplify and scatter the energy. The result was a devastating wave that engulfed a huge swath of the Vulcan armada. Ships vaporized instantly, while others exploded in chain reactions that lit up space like a new constellation. The Vulcan fleet, already in disarray from the loss of their command ships, began to break apart under this overwhelming assault. It's working! Chen exclaimed, her eyes wide as she watched the destruction unfold on the dreadnought's view screens. As the remaining Vulcan ships attempted to retreat, a new fleet appeared at the edge of the solar system. Brian's heart soared as he recognized the ships of liberated alien races, come to join Earth in its moment of triumph. On Earth, the tide of ground battles shifted decisively. Brian's tactical display showed Vulcan forces surrendering en masse, cut off from orbital support and reinforcements. The sleeping warriors leading Earth's defense coordinated a final push, liberating major cities and strategic locations across the globe. As the dreadnought began its descent back to the lunar surface, Brian allowed himself a moment of relief. They had done it. Earth had stood against the might of the Vulcan Empire and emerged victorious. But even as hope blossomed in his chest, Brian knew their work was just getting started. The galaxy had changed forever, and humanity's role in it would never be the same. As they touched down on the lunar surface, joining the survivors of the Lunar Defense Force, Brian steeled himself for the challenges that lay ahead. The war was won, but the task of building a lasting peace was just beginning. As he stepped out onto the scarred lunar landscape, Brian saw the Earth hanging in the black sky above, no longer a planet under siege, but a beacon of hope for countless worlds across the stars.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.